All right, coming up here on 318 on the Sam Bourquin Show, let's talk a little Browns. Let's talk a little Shedeur Sanders here on this steamy Monday. Let's bring in Fred Greetham, our good friend from the Orange and Brown Report, to 1310 WDPM. Fred, are you surviving the heat today already?
Hey, heat schmeat.
It's only 93, sis.
I lived in Phoenix for 9 years. I was coaching out there baseball.
Oh, wow.
It was outside, and it didn't go over or go under 100, from about April till October.
Wow. I will tell you, when I was lucky enough to go out and be a part of the old Indians / Guardians, they'd have the big week for the media, and they'd have you come out and promote the club and this and that. And I loved being out there when it was like 90, 95 degrees. I've been to Vegas probably 4 or 5 times, been about 112, 115. I'll tell you what, though, I didn't mind it because the humidity was like zero. And then up here, we're getting rain, boof, it's 94. And the body's just not quite ready for it. But I'm sure we'll get through. Fred, I wanted to have you on today just to talk a little bit of Shedeur, just kind of put everything on the burner now for 4, 5, 6 weeks or so, and then they come into camp and we get ready to go. The Shedeur Sanders speeding tickets, I found it kind of wild that 50% of the people that I talked to or read comments from were like, no big deal. Get off the kid. He's young. Who doesn't drive 100 miles an hour? Then there was another 50% that said, hey, this could be a warning. This is 2 tickets in less than 3 weeks. It shows the Browns' bad culture. Maybe Shedeur isn't who we think he is. Where do you sit there as part of that conversation?
I think a lot is exactly what you just pointed out. It depends on where you're coming from and what quarterback you want or you think is going to be the answer, if any, this year. I mean, if you have a worldview that Shedeur Sanders could be the franchise quarterback, you're going to just say, hey, it all depends on how he plays. If you're kind of leaning the other direction, Dylan Gabriel or Kenny Pickett or whoever, Joe Flacco, you might be thinking the other way. But I think this will go away once they get to training camp if there's no other incidents. But, it's something not needed for him, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
This time of the year, that's when coaches, front offices hate to get phone calls because usually it's nothing but bad news.
Yeah, it's just I've kind of I let it go by for a couple of days, and today I was like, okay, I'm going to talk about this on the show today just for a little bit. And when it first happened, I thought, oh my God, guy's going 101 miles an hour to 60. How can you do something so dumb? But then, the whole interacting with the officer, and okay, everything, that's how you're supposed to handle those situations. And okay, he'll pay the ticket and we'll move on. Well, we find out a couple of days later, he had a ticket before on June the 5th that he hadn't paid, 91 and a 65. And now I'm saying, okay, is this going to be a pattern now? Or is this a guy who's out on his own for the first time, even out from under the shadow of his dad and everybody else in Colorado? And he's just, I don't know, he's just being a kid. But then I think, hey, you're Shedeur Sanders. You're a member of a professional football team. It's a new organization for you. How can you exude that kind of behavior? And I didn't know where to sit. And you're right. It's all going to blow over by the time they all come back for training camp. But my gosh, it's just, I think unnecessary I think that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, I believe that is. And, we all talked about, the free fall from maybe being as high as the second pick in the draft to the 5th round. If that wasn't a wake-up call, maybe this would be, at least from the perspective of, to me, it might not seem like a big deal, but it's being made out to be a big deal. It's bringing a lot of attention to me, and I think that's part of the original premise of him not being drafted as highly as he might thought is most teams that already have their quarterback don't want somebody that's, going to be a backup to overshadow their starter.
Right.
And we've seen that before, for various reasons. You think of Tim Tebow, you think of any of a number, is that they're really, the attention is on the starter, not the backup. Most teams don't even really know who the the casual fan doesn't know who the backup is for most of the 32 teams. So, that's where Sanders is, whether it's his fault or not. So he just needs to stay clean, get to training camp, and keep improving as he was showing in the off-season program, and give it a run, and learn as much and see where he's at in the preseason, the games. I think he's going to have an opportunity to show what he can do and see how high he can climb on the depth chart.
Fred Greetham is our guest. Check him out on X at Fred Greetham9. Does a great job with the Orange and Brown Report. Fred, our guest here on 1310 WDPN, the Sam Bourquin Show. So when we all do come back to camp, when the quarterbacks come back in, you'll have the four of Shedeur, and you'll have Pickett, you'll have Flacco, and you'll have Gabriel. Do you think anything will happen between now and then as far as some kind of a deal, or will they just bring all four to camp? They'll open up the gates, turn on the lights, and let them go.
Yeah, I think they'll bring the four and get started. I mean, it'll open up some eyes on, early on. I think it'll make sense what direction they're going. I mean, when they start the veterans, report the 22nd of July, that's usually just physical type thing. So I'm sure they won't have a practice, until the next day, at least the 23rd. We haven't seen their schedule, yet. But when you have the first preseason game is August 8th down in Charlotte against Carolina, they're going to practice with them on August 6th. So between, say, July 23rd at the earliest to August 6th, that's not a lot of time. That's less than 2 weeks before they play a game. So you got to get some guys ready, even if it isn't Joe Flacco. The other three, because I think you're going to see a lot of them in the preseason. But what you want to do is, I think you bring the four you have, because you don't know. If you have an injury to any of the four, that changes, the dynamic somewhat. And, you don't want to move on from somebody, when you get to this point and then immediately have a need again. So I think the four will be there. I'm looking for them to make a decision who's going to be the starter, at least when they're over there with the Philadelphia Eagles. They're going to practice jointly with the Panthers the first week. The next week, they're going to have two practices with the Eagles before the second preseason game. And I think the most important practices of training camp, not so much even the preseason games, are going to be those three practices against two other teams, because the coaches are really able to hone in on what they want to look for. And that's where you can really see how the four quarterbacks, respond against, another NFL first team defense. And a lot of what we've seen is that when they get to preseason games after joint practices, they're usually just playing backup. So I think those practices against the Panthers and the Eagles will tell us a lot. And then they're going to make a decision, who's going to start, and get them ready probably in the third preseason game. And then away they go in September. So that's kind of right now where I see it going.
Yep, I would agree with you there. Fred Greetham is our guest. One more, and we'll let you go. And we appreciate you coming on here on this Monday afternoon. We always talk about the four quarterbacks now, and what is Deshaun Watson doing? What has he been up to? Has he been around the facility? Has anybody said anything about what they're going to try to do with him or for him? Or it's been really quiet.
Well, we haven't seen him when we were out there for even the mandatory mini camp, sometimes players come out, the building and you see them. We saw that a year ago with Nick Chubb and so forth, but he wasn't out there. Neither were Michael Hall, David Bell, guys coming off surgeries that weren't on the field. So all we've heard is every time they talk about the quarterback room, Kevin Stefanski was quick to point out that there's 5 of them in the room. Deshaun Watson's, teaching the rookies things, talking about concepts and plays. So they're trying to keep him at least in the discussion.
Okay.
Now, who knows? Because I think this will be really interesting. I mean, from what I understand, the Browns obviously have a big commitment financially, still owed $46 million this year and $46 million next year. They've reconstructed, but as I understand with the insurance settlement, if he were not to play this year, the Browns would get almost all of that, for a year, like $44 million plus in insurance for the player not playing.
Interesting.
But he's showing videos that he's throwing passes and working out, and I don't know how much he's going to push to say he's cleared. In other words, I feel like the Browns have moved on from him this year.
Okay.
And I don't know why they would feel he needs to get back on the field.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if that saves you that much money, yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. This would be a question beyond me. What doctors have to okay him? Is it the Browns doctors? Is it an independent doctor or whatever? So I don't know how that's going to happen or what, if he will push the situation, but they've said he's way ahead of schedule.
Okay.
But on the other hand, most people assume he's not going to play this year, especially after what the owner said and bringing in 4 different quarterbacks.
Right.
I mean, I don't think you'd bring in 4 if you thought he was going to play this year. So
right. Actions speak louder than words. Well, that would be a $45 million savings if they could figure out a way to do that. We'll keep our eyes on it. Fred, we always appreciate the time. Fred Greetham, Orange and Brown Report. Check him out on X at Fred Greetham 9. Fred, stay cool, my friend. We'll talk to you here soon down the road.
Good talking to you, Sam.
There he goes. Fred Greetham, beating the heat here on 1310 WDPN.